My name is Ronnie Cruz, and this is Path of the Network Marketer. All right, welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about what drives you. Are you punishing yourself or are you pushing yourself? And there is a difference. There is a difference. I had to come to terms with this question a handful of years back, maybe about 4 or 5 years back. And when I realized that what was driving me, at least part of what was driving me, wasn't what I thought it was, right? At that time in my career, I was, already like hit massive success. I was in a position of prominence, very high achiever. I was, for all intents and purposes, at the peak of my career in that season of my career. And so I thought that, I was driving and pushing as a high achiever because I wanted to continue and expand, right? Like that's kind of how I operate now. I always want to look towards the next horizon to grow myself and to challenge myself, continually growing, right? However, I realized at one point that drive wasn't necessarily all intentional and driven by just the desire for growth. And here's where this comes from. Here's where the realization came in. I also at the time was very much into long distance running. I still am. It's been a process though these last couple of months getting back into the swing after my ankle injury. But I very much still is part of my identity being a long distance runner. And so I caught myself at that time, pushing harder, longer miles, longer hours on the treadmill. And after all the energy and time spent doing that, I finally just one day asked myself, why am I doing this, right? Why am I pushing myself physically and mentally and emotionally, as well as expending all this time? And I realized that it wasn't as pure of an intention as growth, right, as I thought it was. I realized that part of why I pushed myself so hard was because I was punishing myself unconsciously. And this was coming from very deep-seated unconscious mindsets that I had adapted from childhood. It really did. And not feeling good enough. Always feeling like I didn't measure up, right? And, I'm not going to get into kind of the circumstances of why that came to be. However, I finally at that point in my career realized that was still in the programming. So it just goes to show you, I think one of the things that I want to touch on today, it just goes to show you how deeply rooted some of our patterns really are. Most of the patterns that are holding us back were protective patterns from childhood. Unless we address them and continue to address them, it's not the kind of thing that you address once and it's done. You have to continually work on these patterns. Unless we do that, they're always going to be there thinking that they're protecting us, but really they're not as supportive as they used to be, right? Because clearly a pattern like that was punishing me for not feeling good enough definitely wasn't serving me at that point in my life, right? Like I was already an adult. Again, I was already a high achiever, and I kept pushing myself, to thinking that, okay, I just want to do more. I want to keep growing my business. I want to expand. I just want to keep pushing myself. But really, part of it was I was punishing myself because deep down I didn't feel like I was good enough, right? I've since definitely come to terms with that because of that realization. Right? I realized, okay, I need to let go of not feeling good enough and not measuring up and just continuing to punish myself and really just enjoy where I'm at because I've already done and accomplished a lot of things. And I really learned to celebrate and own that. So it speaks to everything, right? It speaks to everything that I do now. It's not so much that I'm grinding and hustling, and that's again a whole different conversation. The hustle culture. I do push. I still continue to again strive to be better and strive to expand my own capabilities and challenge myself. But it's not out of some feeling. It's not out of some deep-seated unconscious belief that I'm not good enough, right? So I'm no longer punishing myself. And so I wanted to illustrate this. I wanted to talk about this point because I want you to ask that question of yourself. Are you punishing yourself? Or are you really driven and are you pushing yourself because, again, you enjoy the process and you find fulfillment in challenging yourself? It's a really important question to ask because if there are deep-seated unconscious beliefs that you're not good enough, then you will continue to punish yourself until burnout, and that cycle will continue to happen. Prior to this epiphany that I had in my life, I can trace back to just continual cycles of burnout and burnout. Okay, burnout, recover. All right, keep pushing, and burnout, and then recover, and then keep pushing and then burnout. Again, it was because I had an unconscious belief that I wasn't good enough, that I, must have picked up or gotten programmed because of something in childhood or repeated things in childhood. Be careful of this thing, right? Be careful of this thing. And this is part of the work. This is part of the mindset. If you want to be a high achiever and a high performer, you don't have to necessarily address why these things happen. I know looking back, why I had those unconscious patterns and belief systems, but you don't necessarily need to know why and dive into those things to make a change. Just knowing that they're there can be the springboard to changing them, right? The awareness allows you to take a little bit of more control, to be back in the driver's seat so that you can make the changes, make the shifts in mindset that you need to make in order for those things to not be controlling you, right? Because you want what drives you to be something that's fulfilling. You want what drives you to actually be fulfilling, right? You want the journey and the experience and the challenge to be fulfilling, not a punishment. I think a lot of our motivation, it's part of child psychology. That negative reinforcement is from my generation at least. I think that's how we came up, and again, not to say it's good or bad or not to place blame. Most parents are doing their best. However, we see the ramifications of that in a generation that may be experiencing lack of self-worth and lack of feelings of not ever being good enough. So just be mindful of that. If this is a pattern that you carry, if you're pushing yourself harder and harder and harder, and you're not really enjoying the process, then this is what might be happening. You might be punishing yourself, because of these patterns. So be on the lookout for that, and work to address those, and really just let go. Yeah, that's the first step. Awareness, right, is the first step. Sorry, and then letting go, and then just really enjoying the process of growth and challenge, and let it be your own measure and not some unspoken, unwritten measure that you picked up or standard that you picked up that was arbitrary and made up anyways. But these standards and measures that we're judging ourselves on, they don't exist anymore, right? And we don't have to judge ourselves based on those things. Let's create our own standards, and even if we don't hit those standards or make them, tomorrow is a new day, right? Tomorrow is always a new chance to be a blank slate and continue working towards those ideals, right? So don't punish yourself. Stop punishing yourself. Push yourself, yes, and find enjoyment in the growth. Find enjoyment in the challenge, right? So that's my message for today. Thanks for tuning in. More from me tomorrow, of course. So until then, be well, be safe. We'll see you in the next episode.